HyperPhysics is globally recognized as one of the most extensively used free web-based repositories for teaching and learning physics. Since its inception, it has reached a diverse global audience with millions of high school and university students, independent learners and instructors worldwide relying on it daily. Since its web launch in 1998, HyperPhysics has served the global community for over 25 years. Join us as we explore the journey of HyperPhysics with its creator, Dr. Nave. It gives me great pleasure and honor to introduce today's guest. He is a graduate from Georgia Tech. He had completed his postdoc at University of North Wales, joined Georgia State in 1968. He is the founder of the HyperPhysics website. So it gives me great pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. Nave.
Thank you very much. It's good to be with you.
It's nice to have you back in Georgia State. So, Dr. Nave, let's straight away go into today's questions. HyperPhysics is huge. It's the biggest online web platform, online physics web platform out there. So, let's start with the very beginning. How did you start HyperPhysics? What inspired you to start HyperPhysics?
You know, one of the things that strikes me most is just a gratitude for all of the things that came together that made it possible. But it may seem strange, but the beginning of this has its beginning in a course called Conceptual Physics, which came from a sort of emergency. The College of Education had a science education degree, but at some point the state required them, if you were going to get a science certification for middle school and high school, you had to have a physics course. So they came to us, and Dr. Joe Hadley, head of the department, came to me, and so I initiated the course called Conceptual Physics. It was an intensive but qualitative course, 2 3-week courses in the summertime from 9 to 12. So a fairly intensive overview, but was not strongly mathematical. It was more graphical. I was very much into drawing on the board and having a discussion. So that was the start. After 3 years, it was the most popular course that we offered for the College of Education, because these students had not before had physics courses, but they were generally in the last year of their program when they took the conceptual physics course. So they went right out into the school, and since they would probably be the only teacher there who had a physics course, they assigned them the physics course. And so then I got a torrent of information back to me and to the College of Education. We need more. We need more help. The conceptual physics is fine, but it didn't give us enough. So from that point on, I had the passion to find a way to help those teachers, and that ultimately led to HyperPhysics.
So I understand that the word hyperphysics is derived from hypertext. Is that correct?
Yes, because along the way we started using HyperCard, which had hypertext. If you clicked on the text, you went to another location for information. So hypertext, but also the fact that we use concept maps, graphical objects that were active, and so you clicked on it to go to another place. So just hyperphysics was a way to use hypertext to get to physics concepts.
That's wonderful. So this course you taught during the 1980s, I believe.
Yes.
And I would like to spend a little bit more time in that era. The journey from concept maps, handwritten maps, to hypercards, and then to HyperPhysics online web platform. So if you can elaborate a little bit on that time period.
It was, in 1980 was 12 years before the internet, and it was at the dawn of the computer age, so we weren't really using computers in classes. So it was a desperate struggle till about 1986, but in 1986 they started putting graphics on the screen, particularly on the Macintosh platform, and Bill Atkinson created HyperCard, and that he had created a graphics program, and so he's an amazing fellow that created HyperCard. And HyperCard was such that you had a graphic or text on the screen, and you clicked on it, and you get to somewhere else. So it gave you a way to navigate through material. So HyperCard was just the key to that. And so that continued with good graphics tools like Adobe Illustrator. Adobe 88 came out in 88. So I could do good graphics, put them on the screen. The other element that was critical was that I was working with a graduate student education he was doing a thesis on concept maps, just ovals, an oval structure, which then could take you to another such structure, which allowed you to continue to concentrate your study of the material. So with the concept maps and Atkinson's HyperCard and active text, that got me on the way. And so in 1990, I really went in full force to make HyperPhysics with concept maps, active graphics, and active text. So, and start in 1990, I finally was at the point where I could send out material to previous people who had taken the course. I could actually help the teachers. So I sent out HyperPhysics on DVDs, and I also took them to American Association of Physics Teachers meeting, and so it got sort of distributing across the country at that time, starting in like 1990.
That's amazing. So I remember I read that in 1996 you did your first formal presentation about HyperPhysics.
Yes, I was in Maryland. And a big meeting, and so the idea there was with active concept maps, then I could go to a more concentrated subject. I could start with a conceptual overview, which was important for these education majors, to do it conceptually and graphically, so I could then drill down, make it more specific, and continue to drill downs. So that was a term I used in that 96 paper, was drill down. You start over a conceptual overview, and then you drill down to more specifics till you find what you're really looking for. So that was a very much a part of the offering there in the 90s. Still, I was dealing with something that was only one platform. It was only on the Macintosh. I tried some on other platforms, but you had the problem that these tools were disappearing. They would last for a few months and disappear. So that was very alarming. So a major breakthrough came for me in 1997 at the Denver meeting of the American Association of Physics Teachers. We collected probably 30 physics teachers to discuss this problem. And we had a speaker who talked about the clearing in the forest, because he saw it as we were in the middle of a forest and there were all kinds of dead trees lying around us because of all of the instructional platforms that had died. And he suggested that HTML was the clearing in the forest, because that's 97 and 92 was the birth of the internet. So it was going full force by 97. And so we could have something that was active, graphic. I could put HyperPhysics there, and it worked on all platforms using HTML. So it was, like I say, a very fortuitous circumstance that allowed me to move forward and put it on the web. It was a major step in 97. So I had the job of converting from HyperCard to HTML. So that was a hard year. I worked very hard that year, but in the fall of 98, I was able to put the first version of HyperPhysics in HTML on the web.
Wonderful. So was the conversion from HyperCards to HyperPhysics, was that smooth? Was the languages built?
That's another one of the examples I have of the things that worked so well to make this possible, because I still consider Atkinson a genius. because he had created a platform so that my conversion to HTML was very easy. It was very similar in structure. So I was able to convert to the HTML. Atkins had put in place HyperTalk, a mathematics language, but it was very similar to JavaScript. So I went to JavaScript and converted my mathematical routines to JavaScript. So with JavaScript, concept maps, and HTML, I was able to put it on the web in '98.
I think concept maps are very simple and very powerful. It's a powerful tool. And with JavaScript, it's an amazing product.
Yes. JavaScript, what you found, it worked it loaded rapidly, it worked well, and so I was able to convert all the mathematics to JavaScript.
That's amazing. So, '98, that was the first time we went for a web platform. So since the launch of the web version, what challenges did you encounter during the very first few years? Now, once it's there in the internet.
Well, again, my reaction mainly is one of gratitude for the fortuitousness of all of the things that happened. You know, being able to get it on the web, working smoothly, and I would watch it. And for that period, '98, '99, 200, basically it was doubling like every 2 weeks. The use was going up. So, again, back to your question. What was the question?
Well, during the very first few years, challenges.
So I'm more positive than that. It was just opportunities that I had. When I moved on into it was like 2007, then Apple came out with the iPhone and with the iOS, and that was one of the most mind-boggling coincidences or opportunities, because they created the iOS so that everything I had made a button click, you could do with the touch of the finger. That was a major part of the rapid rise of the use of hyperphysics, because you could use it on your laptop, you could use it on your home computer, you could use it on your phone. And so I had, later on when I was teaching, I would project hyperphysics, and I would see people all over the room pulling out their cell phones, and they could track me on their phones. So that was a major thing, a major event that helped it to grow so rapidly.
HyperCards died around that time, right? But you were able to have it on the internet by that time.
Just such fortuitous circumstances, because if I had waited another couple of years, I would have had much more difficulty. See, the fact that I was working very hard that year, and then it was 1998 that HyperCard put out its last edition, and in 2004 they just stopped support for it, so it just died in 2004. So I had to have it done by that time, and I had just, I worked on it for the next several years to expand it. But the fact that I had it in place when HyperCard died was just very fortunate for it.
Indeed. Well, in 2008, HyperPhysics celebrated its 10th year. Now, at this point, you had received some awards as well. The Marriott Classic Award you received during that time as well, 2005, I believe. So, at that time, what were your thoughts about the growth and the trajectory of hyperphysics?
Well, it was growing very rapidly, and it was a good opportunity. I certainly had a lot of people trying to get me to put ads and pop-ups and stuff on it so that they could make money off of it. And so I just held a line against that because of my idea is that I wanted it to be a clean educational resource. So I just didn't want that kind of thing on it. It was not so much challenges in terms of difficulty. Most everything worked well. So it was just a matter of keeping on pushing it out there.
Yeah. Just to give an idea, HyperPhysics now, it's extremely large. It has about more than 20,000 files in it, and the click rates we're talking about in millions. If you analyze data just in the last 1 month, we have about 1 to 2 million unique IP addresses accessing HyperPhysics. So this is a very large platform, and it's fortunate you had worked and your work is fruitful, and we are using it every day. So, from your perspective, what sets HyperPhysics apart from other online resources?
Well, the strong idea I had was to value those users who were approaching it conceptually, because our original market in the conceptual physics were people who really didn't want it to be heavily mathematics. They wanted the ideas. And so that 2-week course of conceptual physics, which I taught for 30 years, we swept those concept ideas in two intensive 3-week courses. But other users would want to have more detail and more mathematical detail, but that fit in naturally because you could just make a click on a concept map oval and go to more detail, and then you could go to another concept map which increased the detail. So the drill down concept was major to me in being able to cover material at more depth. So I didn't have to back off at any level. I just put it deeper in the search.
I think that's a unique feature in HyperPhysics. I mean, it caters for different levels. Now, along that lines, how do you keep up with the content in HyperPhysics? I mean, with the advancements in the fields, how do you keep it up?
Well, I can't say I did. You don't keep up with everything. I certainly along the way added a section on the James Webb Space Telescope because a major development, and I added a section. Now, these are both fairly recent, on the Higgs boson and the connection to mass. So I try to do that, but I can't claim to have caught up. And particularly, I had attended courses with Dr. Dave Wingert in astronomy and Dr. Deepak Raghavan, and it's wonderful, the astronomy, but it's a little bit beyond me. That's something that could really expand in HyperPhysics to those ideas. So, but I've also just kind of kept track of conversations, so I have conversations with all over the world, and so that has been very helpful because my wife says I have editing from around the world. And she was amused on Sunday morning at breakfast that I got an email from Australia pointing out a misspelled word. And so I had detailed and then more major editing from around the world. So there was a great deal of help. A lot of people would jump in to try to, I pointed out so many mistakes, and so that editing was very helpful along the way.
That's amazing. Now, what feedback have you received from users? I mean, do you remember any specific feedback, and how did it influence the platform?
Well, as I've thought about the editing, I had a physician in Oregon who would email me every couple of days. I had a man running a printing business in Belgium. He emailed me every couple of days. And so they kept just a chain of editing, pointing out misspelled words, misuse. So that helped. I mean, I had an enormous amount of help in that way. They point out different things to add. So along the way, once it got going, I had plenty of feedback.
I remember reading somewhere that about a post that you had on sundogs and how people responded with different pictures. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yes, that was great fun because I had a lot of conversation with Robert Greenler in Wisconsin or Minnesota, and he was an expert on atmospheric optics, and so I would argue with him about it because he would say, you can see sundogs anywhere in the world. And I said, oh no, that requires ice crystals in the atmosphere. And if you had ice crystals around Atlanta, you'd have clouds below them. And so we would argue. So one of my students, Clay Turner, actually, who worked with the astronomy here, he was an excellent student. And he came in one day with a picture of a sundog taken north of Atlanta. So I had to admit that to Robert Greenler. And then I had a friend in Singapore that I correspond with regularly, and he had gone down within 2 degrees of the equator, and he had a picture of a sundog at the equator. Then I had correspondence with New Zealand, a physicist, who was going to Antarctica regularly, and he had a picture of a sundog in Antarctica. So I completely had to say, oh, I missed it. I was wrong. And so it was very interesting to put in the sundog story.
That's amazing. With editors around the world and people to help in posts like that's amazing.
Yeah, that was great fun.
So now, as an undergraduate while studying in Sri Lanka, I used hyperphysics. While I was doing my PhD, I used hyperphysics. Now I'm teaching. I'm still using hyperphysics.
Well, that's good to hear. Good.
So, over the span of nearly 3 decades, hyperphysics has touched lives of millions. Now, can you elaborate on some unforgettable memories along the line, close to your heart?
Well, you'll always get one particular story from me, which is my favorite story, which is like 3 or 4 years in. That I was at home on Saturday morning and I got an email from a 10-year-old girl in New Zealand saying, I can't get to hyperphysics. I was trying to use it for my Monday assignment because hyperphysics had crashed. So I got in my car, drove to Georgia State, rebooted a server, and went back and then emailed her. So that's my all-time favorite story. I've lost track of her. She's now about 30 years old. I would love to be in touch with her, but it's my favorite story. But a sadder story was Rwanda's story of the genocide, because I got an email from one of the professors at the University of Rwanda saying, we have no books. Our library is burned down. We cannot afford to replace the books. Can you let us use hyperphysics license us to use hyperphysics to study for physics. So I sent them CDs and gave them permission to use it in their coursework, and they sent me Christmas cards for several years thanking me for the use of it. So it was used for several years after that. So, a lot of things like that. Another one, even last year, that we talked about last year when we had the meeting here, is we got a letter from a lady in Pakistan. She had used hyperphysics through her undergraduate and through the point of a master's degree, but had to struggle. She had a family, had to take care of her family, and struggled all the way through that, but was still hoping to get a PhD, and so she was thanking me for hyperphysics. The thing that hit me there is that hyperphysics, without any barriers, without any pop-ups, without any ads, and without any manipulations, is free to everybody. That's one of the things that's very important to me. And so my appreciation for Georgia State for continuing to be the server for it is because a lady like that, who had otherwise great barriers to her education, was able to use it to her benefit. So I'm very pleased about that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I also remember a story that you had mentioned about two graduate students in India
Yes,
got a laptop and just started teaching.
yes, I really like that story because I sent them DVDs as well because they wanted to put it on their laptop and go into the rural areas and teach. So that was just a great idea. So that's the kind of thing I certainly would like to support. And one other story probably ought to is that after I actually retired from here, I was coming as a volunteer in the sound course in the laboratory. So I was just volunteering. I just come in because I had developed the material for the lab. So I kind of enjoyed visiting the lab. So I walked into the laboratory that day, and when he heard my name, the laboratory came and hugged me, and then got out his phone and took a selfie of me, because he had been using HyperPhysics for 5 years in Pakistan with a colleague to teach the MCAT course for people who wanted to get into medical school. And he and his partner had taught whole auditoriums full of people in MCAT. So I just encountered him by walking into the laboratory here. So just had a great fun experience. It's good. Like I've just feel very much a sense of gratitude for being able to get through the barriers to get to the point where you put it up as a useful resource that people can use to teach an MCAT course in Pakistan.
That's amazing. HyperPhysics has helped millions and it continues to help millions. So students and educators all around the world use HyperPhysics on a daily basis. What would be your advice for them on how to use HyperPhysics effectively?
Well, I've used the drill down course, thing. So I think most people would come into a subject wanting the qualitative aspects. They wanted the ideas first. And so having a concept map, active concept maps, allow them to drill down. So getting used to going ahead and drill down, because quickly you can drill down many steps there. So that's one thing. I did put in an index, and there's a search box that sometimes people don't find. It's a search box in the HyperPhysics main thing. And if you go into that search box, you can put any subject. But if you put in the subject and then you put HyperPhysics in that search box as well, then it mainly searches the HyperPhysics thing. So it's a good way to search for any term inside HyperPhysics. So those are ways to use it more effectively.
And I believe a full translated version is available in Spanish.
Yes.
And then there are other translations on the are working on some translations as well.
Well, the Spanish one is amazing because Manuel Olmo in Sevilla, Spain, just volunteered to do it. He's a retired engineer. He's been an amazing translator. I visited him in 2017. And so we've collaborated the whole thing. So it is two HyperPhysics. You got a Spanish and an English. It is it's a vast amount of material. So I have two people, one in Argentina and one in Brazil, that are working on in the other language, and that's a promising thing. But it's such a big project that. So Spanish and Portuguese, they're working on it in Portuguese. So if we could get it up in Portuguese as well, I think that would be a good addition. Everybody, I think it's amusing that one of the translations that are going on is in Talk Pidgin.
Talk Pidgin.
So it's like a combination of a indigenous language and German in Papua New Guinea. So I gave him permission. So right now, probably the major things going on is that I've given permission in China and in India. So translation into Hindi is kind of underway. So hopefully those will develop further. I feel like the Chinese one is probably quite advanced. So I had a fairly recent conversation with him.
That's amazing. And just to note, again, we're talking about 20 to 25,000 files. So it takes time. So throughout the years, many have contributed to hyperphysics in various ways. What would be your message to them?
The contribution is more in way of suggestions and editing and correction. In the first 4 or 5 years, I did have graduate students that would give me an article to put in. So I've credited them in the credit line at the bottom. But since then, I have not had a great deal of contribution. I did talk last year to someone who was really interested in doing a broader treatment of chemistry, but that is, we'll still look at that. So I certainly would invite further development. I've tried to add things of biology and chemistry and biochemistry just to have the ideas. So those are all kind of at the conceptual level, and their drill down is not to more detailed biochemistry. Those drill downs there are back to the fundamental physics concepts. So I'm just giving an overview and then give drill down points to basic physics that help those disciplines. So that's the way I've approached those other disciplines.
Your wife, she's from a nursing background. Did she help along the journey as well in creating the content? How did?
There is one concept map that's health-related physics, and so she helped a lot with that. And of course, as a nurse, she knew a lot of doctors, and so she and I developed a textbook, Physics for the Health Sciences, and she researched that for me with the doctors there, so we put in different medical equipment so that there is some material of that nature that she helped with.
So, looking ahead, what do you envision as the future trajectory of hyperphysics, and how do you plan to continue innovating and expanding its impact?
Well, I'm, spending more time with family now. So I'm not developing that much. I continue to work on it, but I'm answering questions, I'm giving permission for graphics, and that sort of thing is mostly what I'm doing. But I certainly would encourage others to add material, like develop, particularly in the areas where I can't add so much, like in astronomy, astrophysics areas.
Any final thoughts you want to add?
Well, my final thought would be like my beginning thought. I'm just grateful to the fact that the opportunities that came. The conceptual physics was a struggle, but it opened the door, and it made me determined to find a way to help the teachers out there. And so that's the thing that kept me on the track until I got the tools that I could actually use to create hyperphysics. So I'm grateful for those opportunities. That's my main line, I think.
Well, thank you so much for visiting us today and for all that you have done for physics and physics education. In behalf of all the students and educators, I would like to thank you for all that you have done. We wish you all the very best in all that you do. May good health, joy, and happiness be with you all.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity here.